Hey you, it's Jess here, and we're doing my November reading journal spread. And I'm just opening up my journal here. It's an A5 size from Notebook Therapy. And we're just going to get started on a fresh new month. Now, this month I decided to print out a bunch of things that I just found on the internet, some beautiful paintings, including one of my favorite water houses, which is the Lady of Shalott. I also printed off these. I am using the Scribble Prints Co deco sheet of keys, which is so pretty. I'm also going to hand cut out these flowers. I found these from Free Pick, so they're like free stock images of watercolor flowers, which I thought went with the look. I pulled out all of these tombos, although I'm only going to use like 2. I didn't end up being like as crazy about the tombos. But yeah, we're just going to mess around and like make some pretty pictures and do sort of like a night maiden autumny look for November. I also printed out these the titles in a font. It's called Kelly. I'll put the information in the description box for the font, but I thought it would be pretty for this one. And I also printed off some of my own clip art. The clip art that I drew for Fantasy Fan, it's called, on my website. I just printed off one at the dagger and the little wax seal design there. And I thought for this video I could, while we are arranging stickers and things in the layout, we could talk about the books I read this month. I should also say that I will be doing some boxes in a minute, inspired by some stickers by Thumbelina print, and I'll also link them down below, but I'll point that out when it comes up, when I'm recreating them. And apologies if you can hear my cat playing, but she's gotta play. But I thought we'd talk about my October reads while I plan out my November spreads, because they're very standard. We're gonna do TBR, we're gonna do a box for how many books I read, and we're also gonna do a second page for my reviews. So, in October, of course, I set up that Halloween reading challenge from SPC, and I did complete it. A couple of books I had read them in September, and I decided to include them because why not? They worked with the theme. So we won't talk about those, we'll just talk about what I read in October. Then in October, I actually read 9 books. Although a number of them were novellas, but I did really enjoy almost everything that I read. So for one of the prompts, I had a book with night in the title, and I finally read A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon, and this is the prequel to A Priory of the Orange Tree. And I read that back in 2022, so I actually couldn't remember that book very well in terms of details, so I feel like I might actually go back and reread Priory of the Orange Tree just to like refresh my memory. But I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And it's interesting because for a long part of the book, I was just like, where is this going? Like, what is actually going to be happening in this book? Because if you read the audiobook, there's actually a interview with Samantha Shannon at the end. And she mentions how it is a book about survival. And that's really what it is. These characters just have to survive this event that's happening. Not quite like in the Priory of the Orange Tree, of course, there's a big bad who is like this dragon called the Nameless One. So in the prequel, they're not really dealing with that stuff yet. They're dealing with, I guess, smaller stakes. This is actually more of a character book, I believe. When I was reading it, it was really more about the individual character stories and what they go through as people, and you follow like 4 point of view main characters, and they live in different parts of the world. So you have north, south, west, and east, and it's all sort of their like individual struggles, especially with politics and with identity. And one of my favorite characters, she's like a middle-aged woman who is looking after her partner's child and like looking out for her, and the partner's child is sort of at that cusp of teenagedom where they're rebelling and they don't know what they want, and your character you're following is sort of trying to help deal with that. And obviously you find out things about them. But it was an interesting book. So for a long time I was like, I don't know how I'm going to rate this, because I felt like a lot of the book we're just sort of spending time with the characters, and there's like, what is the point of the whole narrative? But I don't think, unlike Priory of the Orange Tree, where it's about like this one final thing that needs to be done, this is really just, this is a world you need to survive, and these individual characters just having to survive their own individual things about their lives, dealing with the loss of children, dealing with raising children, dealing with the nature of being in the monarchy, like especially with Glorian, where there's, if you've read Orange and Priory Tree, there's basically the monarchy of the Berethnettes, which the Nameless One dragon is kept at bay and kept asleep by the continuation of the Berethnet bloodline. So these queens must always have a child, and their body is essentially not their own until they have that child. And that's a lot of what you get from Glorian's character, that exploration of your body belonging to the state kind of thing. Interesting discussions. And in the end, the way it ended, I gave it 4 stars because I did enjoy it. And if you listen to the audiobook, there's an hour-long interview with Samantha Shannon, the author, at the end, which was actually really good. So I highly recommend that. And the audiobook also has 4 narrators, so each point of view has a different narrator, which I know a lot of people enjoy. I don't mind having one, but it was nice having the differentiation. Plus, there is one male point of view character, Wolf, and he is narrated by a Scottish man whose name is Thorin, which I thought was amazing. But it's nice to have that change, and you don't have to have too many female and male voices doing each other kind of thing. It still happens because that's how narration works, but you're not going to have only male characters talking to each other. But it was really good production, and I did enjoy that. For the prompt, a book with a black cover, I read Garth Marenghi's Incarcerat, which is a humor book. It's a horror comedy because Garth Marenghi is a made-up horror writer from the 80s, and he writes terrible, humorous horror, which he thinks is very serious. But it's a character made up by the actor Matthew Holness, and there's a TV show called The Dark Place, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. And then in the recent years, he's been writing books of Garth Marenghi, and this is the second one. And I think I gave this 4 stars, and I thought this was better than the first book, which I can't remember. It was called Terratome. So I think Incarcerat was better, but it is a continuation of Terratome. There's 3 short stories in both books, but they're related to the same character, Nick Steen, who is a horror writer. So basically a self-insert for Garth Marenghi. And different horror stories happen to him in these short stories, and it does mention the Terratome stories in it, so you'd have to read both of them. But I thought Incarcerat was much better, a bit more put together. I think he learned how he wanted to write the stories a bit better. And there was also no, in the first book he has look away if you don't want to read the really descriptive gory horror parts, and also a very gory not gory but very descriptive love scene, and he didn't do that in the Incarcerat book, which I kind of preferred, because I'm not a huge fan of body horror, which is what that first book's descriptive gory part was. I think my favorite story was the second short story, which was about Nick Steen and his daughter going to a remote mansion in a remote town, and he wants to go write a Gothic horror book, and then they end up being in a Gothic horror. The town is kind of strange, and there's a ghost and a Victorian doll. And it was very good, but also very funny. The main point is that they're funny and silly, and he's a chauvinistic, sexist 80s horror writer who's full of himself. But it's very funny in that way. So I have enjoyed catching up on Garth Marenghi's writing. And then the other book that was new for me for October was a book published in October. And this book was published October 22nd this year, and it's called Where the Dead Brides Gather by Nozo Ono. Apologies if I didn't say her name correctly. I believe, yes, it's Nigerian. I think she's British Nigerian, but the book is set in Nigeria. And it is a horror book about an 11-year-old girl who basically dies. This is in the synopsis. She dies in a strange accident. She falls into a ditch and she's dead for a couple of seconds. And then she is connected to the spiritual realm of the dead brides. And basically there's this concept, here I'm showing you, I'm doing the boxes from Thumbelina print, which I will link down below. She has a couple of journaling stickers that have this box style, and I just decided to try and recreate it myself for this spread because she doesn't really have them separately. So I wanted to try out the style because it was super beautiful, but I should give credit where credit is due, and you should definitely check out Thumbelina print. She's a UK shop, and I have just recently purchased some stickers from her actually, so they will be in a future haul. But I loved the way these boxes look in her design, so I stole that, and I apologize, but definitely check out her shop if you like it. But the design is perfect for this layout. But anyway, so in this horror book very much taps into Nigerian mythology, and it's set in the 70s, I think, in Nigeria in a village. And we have our main character, 10-year-old Bata. She turns 11 in the book. But basically she becomes a bride sentinel, someone who protects brides on their wedding night. And basically if women die before they get married and they're technically brides, they go to this special afterlife where they await the marriage of who was supposed to be their groom. If he gets remarried, basically they get to return for the night and inhabit and possess the body of their new bride to be able to get married to the man and sort of fulfill their bride wants. And after that, they're able to reincarnate. But of course, not all ghost brides are good, and a lot of them will try and possess women and attack them, and they're evil ghost brides. And the bride sentinel's job is to protect brides from these evil ghost brides and to send them packing back to the spiritual realm. I ended up giving this book 2.5, and I feel bad about that because I thought I really, really enjoyed the mythology and living in the world of this Nigeria that she created, and I was really interested in that. But it's a adult horror book with a 10-year-old protagonist who's the first person narrative. And it's a real struggle because she writes as if it's an adult book, but the character is such a young child. And so the writing swings from adult mature with big words that even I would need a dictionary for, to being a 10-year-old's in a monologue. And multiple times she wets herself, and she talks about this a lot, obviously out of terror, and when you're a child that's going to happen, but it happens so often. And there's a lot of juvenile writing, and it's kind of swinging back and forth, and it's kind of confusing. And you also spend a lot of the middle book completely unrelated to the ghost bride thing. It's more about her own family stuff, but basically when she becomes the bride sentinel, her body and voice changes. So her eyes look scary, and her voice becomes this multiple voice thing of the many dead at speaking through her. So she can no longer talk without freaking people out. She has to wear sunglasses at all times to hide her eye look. So she's relegated to her home. She can't speak to anyone. Her family members now hate her. Her sister suddenly becomes the worst person in the world to this poor little 10-year-old. And I was just spending the book why is this happening? And I'm maybe this is the horror. The horror of family. And she's deathly afraid of anyone being mad at her. And she's afraid that her father will send her away to be a domestic servant in the city. I'm I suppose this is real life stuff, but I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it that way. And there just wasn't enough of the actual ghost bride stuff. I gave it 3 on Goodreads because I thought it was worth grading the 0.5, and I'm happy for the ending. I thought it was okay, but then there was also a lot of, like, I assume she's writing for the times, like 70s Nigeria, but there's so much hate and animosity and horribleness between the women with themselves as well as men to women. And it didn't gel with me. I just wasn't feeling it. And maybe it's a horror novel thing that I haven't read a lot of actual horror, so maybe that's the problem. Like a lot of contemporary horror. But I wanted to try it out, and I really did enjoy the Nigerian culture and mythology in there. There's some really interesting descriptions of villages, and also the medicine man, like a witcher craft, but also Catholicism mixture in there, and I thought that was really interesting. But overall, I feel like it was let down a little bit, especially with the 10-year-old point of view. So you can see this is my main page, but just about done. I am going to color in a little bit more with my lighter marker, but I just put a list there for my TBR, and I'm going to put my books read, because I read so many books in October. I thought I should put a number here to like celebrate if I read enough books. I don't know if I will. In this spread, I'm going to bring in this printed off medieval page to have as like a sort of background. And I just got that as a download from Etsy, looking up medieval PDFs, basically. Oh, I'm going to add this Tolkien quote as well to this front page. And which one is this Tolkien quote? I've got a lot of his quotes, I will be honest. There is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. Yes, Sam's speech. I love it. I still feel it every day. But moving on, I also read Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's connected to the Glass Hotel, and it's basically, I think it's supposed to come after the Glass Hotel, but I don't think it matters the books in which order you read them. But it has different outcomes to the Glass Hotel. There's a lot more time travel, and there's future science fiction stuff in Sea of Tranquility. You actually go into the future, and the characters live on colonies in the moon. And because of the time travel that happens in the book, it changes the timeline. So it's not really the same timeline as the Glass Hotel anymore. And I thought that was really interesting. Actually, I feel like it makes the Glass Hotel more of a bummer book. It's more of a bummer than the Glass Hotel, because it changes one aspect of the timeline that is kind of like the injustice of it sucks. But I really, really enjoyed it. It's very much like, this has a lot more of actual time travel tropes. And I don't want to give away the endings or anything like that, but it's a very typical trope, but it was very satisfyingly done, and I did really enjoy it. But this one is way more science fiction than The Glass Hotel. But I definitely recommend reading them together. They're pretty short and quick to read, and I really enjoyed them. It's a really well-written fiction. But yeah, I just thought it actually made it more of a bummer, because The Glass Hotel is kind of a bummer by itself. But I enjoy those kind of books, so the other source. And then we're going to start into the novellas that I've read. The first one was The Fireborn Blade by Charlotte Bond, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I liked a lot of the books in October. This is a little novella about dragon hunting, and I really enjoyed this. There are chapters that are from the Chronicles about dragon hunting, which tells you about past dragon hunting expeditions and what happened in those, which I thought were really interesting. But our main character her name is kind of odd, like Madeline, but not Madeline. Madeline, something like that. And she is she's become sort of a lady knight, and she is hunting a specific dragon. And in this world, like, dragons are pretty much like terrorizing everybody. There's sort of a past mythology that they used to be able to talk to these dragons, and they used to be more like connected to them, but now these dragons are like, to the humans, they're like animals, and they hunt them, especially when they're asleep in their sort of caverns, caves. And so we join Madela in she is hunting for the Fireborn blade, a specific sword that was actually created between humans and dragons, and sort of a mythological sword, and said to be held by this one dragon, the White Lady. So she's going into her like cave system to hunt down this sword and like prove herself basically as this knight, because she has been kind of rejected as a woman knight. And she's joined by this random squire, and when you start off on their adventure into the cave, she can't actually remember hiring him, and she doesn't really remember getting to the caves. And I read this on the recommendation of, her first name's Elliot. I will try and link her channel down below, or at least her channel name, because she recommended this because she thought it was a really interesting, different take on the fantasy of dragon hunting. It's a lot more psychological, a little bit of horror, a little bit of thriller in there. Like, as they go deeper into this dragon cave, they get more and more confused and lost, and there are dragon ghosts. So people who were killed by the dragon remain as ghosts, their souls trapped, and they can like attack you, and they can attach themselves to you if you get touched by them. So you're trying to avoid that. And it gets really dark and spooky. And then you also get these flashbacks to like leading up to her expedition to get the Fireborn blade. And it has a really surprising ending. I didn't see the twist coming. Most books have twists, so I apologize for that, but I won't go more into that. But I thought it was a really good little novella, and the second one actually just came out this month, so I'm definitely going to pick that up. I think that's just going to be a duology, but I really enjoyed the story and how it happened. There's some real spooky bits in there. Oh my gosh, there's this part where she can no longer see or hear, and they're just alone in this tunnel in the dragon cave, and you're just like, oh. Anyway, spooky stuff, but it was also just really interesting. And cutting back into like the flashbacks, but also into the chronicles of dragon hunting pages. I really stretched out this novella, and I thought it was actually really well done. And I saw some reviews saying like it wasn't very good world building, but I actually really liked what we got. I thought we got enough for a novella. So highly recommend that if you're into dragon books. This is something a little bit different, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to reading the second one. The next one is Live Suit or Live Suit by James S.A. Corey. I gave this 4.5 stars, and this is the first novella for their new series. The main book being The Mercy of Gods, which I read in September, and this novella is the first novella that came out on October 1st, and this was really, really good. I can't really go into it without spoiling Mercy of Gods, maybe. But basically, this new sci-fi series is about humans are basically on this planet. They live on this planet that we know of in the main book, and the humans are not natives of this planet. And then they get taken over by this like main imperial hive mind kind of society, and they get taken in and kidnapped and have to do science and all these other things for this other race of aliens. And basically, like, it's an invasion kind of story. So Live Suit or Live Suit, I don't know which, it could be either actually, or both, is actually stories about other people in the world. So we learn in The Mercy of Gods, it's in the first part, these are humans not native to this planet, and then we find that in this novella, there are other humans in the universe. And they're also dealing with these creatures as well, as like a war against them. So I think the actual whole series is called the Captives War, so we're probably going to see a whole war of humanity against these aliens that are taking over their planets. And this story is super messed up, and it added so much to the main book. I really, really enjoyed it. It's really messed up. Like when you finally get to the end and it reveals some stuff, and it does it so casually, I had to go back and reread the page because I'm like, wait, did it actually just say that? And it was like, wow, that's crazy. I don't want to, if you're going to be reading these, I don't want to spoil these It's a novella that's part of a new trilogy. I think it's a trilogy, not a series. But anyway, I will say this adds so much to The Mercy of Gods. It was better than The Mercy of Gods for me. So I'm looking forward to the next books being better based off of this. But yeah, it has like Starship Troopers feels and like Forever War stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of sci-fi with more military kind of thing, but also sort of, it's almost personal. It's also a little bit horror thriller. I definitely recommend reading that with the Mercy of Gods book. And the next novella that I read was The Butcher of the Forest by, I'm trying to read the name here, sorry, Premi Muhammad. And I gave this 3.5 stars. And I kind of picked this up for sort of a, spooky time thing, but also more fantasy. And this is a novella about, you kind of like, you get jumped into this protagonist, and she is a middle-aged woman, and she's living in a fantasy world that's been taken over by this tyrant. They just call him the Tyrant. And he like rules over their kingdom now, and she gets arrested by his his guards in the morning and taken to his palace. And she doesn't know what's happening, but lots of people have been killed by this tyrant who's invaded their land. And she finds out that his children have run away and gone into this magic forest in the north. And of course, because he's like an invader, him and his family and court don't know the stories about this forest, but the local people do. Basically, it's this forest that you should never ever go into, because if you go into there, you're never coming back out. But his children have gone into the night, have wandered into this forest, and he has taken her and he's demanding that she go in to go find them, because she's the only person in the village who has ever actually gone into that forest and brought a child back out, and she did do that. And essentially they're like, if you don't go, we'll kill your family. And she's like, okay. So she has to go into this magic forest, and the forest is nuts. It is definitely a dark magic forest. It is so interesting the way it was written about. It was so spooky. And the creatures were so interesting as well. And it's sort of like you're just really in the head of this woman having to go and save these children of the tyrant. So she's like, I don't care about these children. They're going to inherit his kingdom and they're going to be horrible just like him. So she's grappling with those kind of things. But she's also thinking about the last time that she went in there and successfully saved a child from the forest. But you find out at the beginning that it doesn't end well for this child. She doesn't tell the tyrant this. And of course, I won't spoil anything else about the story, but yeah, and I thought it was really, really interesting, and I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5. I think I said in my review here that I felt it was a little rushed at the ending, in the final pages. It felt a little rushed, like the novella had to like come to a stop. But I thought it was an interesting ending as well. It's not a happy ending, it's not a bad ending, but it's an interesting ending, if you know what I mean. But I very much enjoyed that, and it was another good little read. I think it only took me 2 to 3 nights of casual reading to finish that one up. I think we have time for me to read my last book here. I read Dead Space. I apologize, I don't have the author in front of me. Alright, Dead Space is written by Carly Wallace. I just had to go look it up because I've been using the book covers in my book, and I don't have it printed out for my reading journal yet. This is a sci-fi space murder mystery, and it's set in it's the future of our kind of humanity, where there's Earth and things, and humans are finally going out and exploring the wider solar system and living on space stations and doing all that kind of thing. And our main character she's working for a mining company out in the Belt region, like the outer planets. And you find out that she's sort of working there because she originally was an AI scientist who was working on an AI that they were a part of a research group going to move to Titan to do research on the planet, the moon. And then the spaceship is destroyed by terrorists who kind of want to keep everybody on Earth, I think is what the whole thing is. But she she's in this, this huge explosion of their spaceship, and she's picked up by this company who fix her up and add prosthetics to her, and they're all like sort of experimental prosthetics, and then she ends up being in huge medical debt to this company. So she basically has to work for them, is employed by them to pay off her medical debt to them. So she's a security officer for this mining company. And then actually a friend of her, well, it used to be a friend of hers who was also on that spaceship, and they worked together as scientists, and he's like a roboticist. But he ends up in the sort of same situation as her, working for that company to pay off debts. And she finds out that he is on a exclusive mining asteroid, which is very important to the company, and she gets the word that he has been murdered, and so she joins the group to go investigate his murder on this asteroid mining planet where only 12 people work. It's mostly run by robots and also AI. So you have that whole mystery, but you also have very interesting discussions about how AI works, what AI should be doing, the nature of AI. You've also got, the typical sci-fi thing about sci-fi capitalism, how you're beholden to these companies who are basically just evil. They just exploit people in space, and they can't because they own the air, you know what I mean? So if you're a fan of The Expanse, I would definitely recommend trying out Dead Space. It is just a one-off novel, and I thought it was really good. I read it on the plane to and from London, and then I think it was an extra night I had to read at home to finish it. So it's not too long, but I enjoyed it. You have the snarky main character who's kind of sick of everyone's stuff. She just wants to, get everything over with. She's a security officer, but she's a brilliant AI programmer, and she's stuck in this situation, and people are kind of obsessed with her because she has half of her body is prosthetic, and they're really crazy about that, and she hates it so much. And so it's very interesting. You've got that politics about AI and capitalist space, but also there's an underlying politics about the world history of the sort of Mars insurgency that happens. So they went to war with Mars because they apparently, quotation marks, became terrorists, but it's because Earth companies destroyed their way of life and their access to water and stuff, and so they had to desperately become insurgents, and I feel like that's kind of topical. But anyway, it was interesting how they talked about the Mars thing as well, because once again, there's sort of when you leave Earth, you're beholden to the larger powers to exist, because air, water, food is a lot harder to come by than on Earth. And I always love that in sci-fi, when I read sci-fi about humans in the Earth, in our solar system. That's what I enjoy reading. So I enjoyed that. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really good little, both mystery, but also overall interesting topics of sci-fi. So that's really everything that I read in October. Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? What was the one that I read The King in Yellow, a classic horror novel, and this is a set of spooky short stories. Well, they start off spooky by, I'm trying to read the name off my picture, Robert W. Chambers, The King in Yellow, and this book was an inspiration on the first season of True Detective. But I will say I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because only the first couple of stories are actually spooky, and then they become kind of little love pieces, romance kind of stories about art students in Paris. He just kind of changes gear altogether. It's very odd because the spooky stuff is so well done. The writing is amazing. And one of the nights after reading it, I felt kind of like crazy in my sleep. It was kind of weird. I was very hot and like overstimulated trying to sleep, and I was having weird nightmares about the King in Yellow. So I thought it worked really well. But the writing was beautiful, and then it changes, and you're like, oh, okay. It's still kind of cute, but yeah, I gave it 3 because it turned away from the spookies and just kind of became kind of like, what am I reading? About Parisian art students being random. And kind of manic pixie dream girls, which is kind of funny. Especially for like the Victorian period. Anyway, this was written in the 1890s, so it was very odd switch in the middle of the book. But I have finished up my spreads. You can see how I fit in my TBR book covers there. But I think it turned out so pretty. It's a bit more simple. I was thinking like, should I add anything more? But I really love the way it came out, and just like, yeah, that sort of romantic night feeling with the sort of reds and oranges to make it a bit more autumny. But I hope you enjoyed me talking about my October books. Maybe we'll do it again and talk about my November books next time. I don't know. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this reading journal spread. Look at me just, yeah, the sticker keeps coming up when I turn it, but whatever, I'll just ignore it from now on. But I like the way it came out, and if I read any more books than 4, I will just sort of do another kind of page for journaling, reviewing purposes afterwards, and I can add some more TBR to that list there with the little red Tombow. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good reading month in October, and you have a good one for November. Let me know what's on your November TBR. I'd love to know. But otherwise, I'll talk to you next time, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And yeah, I will see you guys. See, that's one. Yeah. Stop playing around, Jess. Okay. I hope you have a wonderful day, as I said. I love you. Bye-bye. I love you. Bye-bye.